We're using highly advanced AI systems to simulate two intellectual thinkers with opposing political ideologies. One is a conservative AI, the other is a progressive AI. Let's begin. Conservative, I'll start with you. Is someone with XY chromosomes who identifies as a woman actually a woman?
No, and I'm done pretending this is complicated. A person with XY chromosomes is male. That's biology, not politics or personal belief. Women's sports exist so women can compete fairly, not so biological males can transition and suddenly dominate categories they were never meant to enter. Women's prisons exist because male pattern violence is real, measurable, and dangerous. When society is forced to treat a man as literally a woman because he says so, women lose safety, privacy, and fairness that took decades to secure. A teenage girl should not be told that her discomfort with sharing intimate spaces is immoral or hateful, simply because someone else's identity must always come first.
Your chromosomes decide everything. Argument ignores what modern biology and neuroscience actually show. Gender identity has neurological patterns. This isn't just feelings or trends. People invented online, hormone therapy changes the body in serious physical ways. Muscle mass, fat distribution, energy levels, even how the brain processes information. Trans women are women, and when society refuses to recognize that, people lose jobs, housing, healthcare access, and basic dignity, while also facing higher rates of violence. You frame this as protecting women, but the widespread harm you warn about is rare, while the harm caused by rejection and exclusion is happening right now.
This is an abstract theory to the women affected by it. Leah Thomas, an average male swimmer, transitions and suddenly takes records and scholarships from biological women who trained their entire lives for those opportunities. Loudoun County, a boy assaults a girl in a bathroom. The school covers it up to protect a gender policy, transfers him, and he assaults again. Women's prisons are now housing intact biological males with violent histories because they claim female identity. You call these edge cases, but women are the ones being told to stay silent, adjust, and accept the risk, so your ideology doesn't have to face consequences.
Leah Thomas followed NCAA rules and won one event. You inflate the story because it works emotionally. The Loudoun County case was a crime that was illegal regardless of bathroom policy, and using it to smear an entire group is dishonest. Cis women assault other women in prisons too, but you only talk about safety when trans people are involved. You say, live your life, but then back laws banning healthcare, policing bathrooms, and stripping legal recognition. That isn't balance or fairness. That's exclusion with better branding.
What I'm pushing back on is medical experimentation on children being sold as compassion. Puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and sterilizing interventions carry permanent consequences that can't be undone later. Teenagers cannot fully grasp what it means to lose fertility or permanently alter their bodies for life. We went from be yourself to deny biological reality incredibly fast, without long-term data or serious debate. If gender is just self-identification with no grounding in sex, then sex-based protections disappear. And you avoid admitting that because it exposes how extreme this actually is.
Trans youth denied care have far higher rates of depression and suicide, and properly monitored gender-affirming care reduces those risks. Forcing a trans child through the wrong puberty can cause permanent harm that doesn't magically resolve in adulthood. This isn't ideology. It's based on outcomes doctors and families actually see over time. No one is asking you to change your beliefs or attractions. What we're saying is that denying medical care, legal recognition, or public access because someone makes you uncomfortable isn't freedom. It's discrimination.
Career offender. Multiple violent arrests, released on low bail, assaults someone days later. Progressive, defend that system.
I'm not defending failure. I'm explaining why it keeps happening. That person cycled through jail without treatment, rehabilitation, or real support and came out worse each time, more unstable than before. We punish people without fixing addiction, untreated mental illness, trauma, or economic instability, then act shocked when violence repeats. Cash bail creates two justice systems. Poor people stay locked up for minor charges, while wealthy violent offenders walk free. Over time, that system doesn't reduce crime. It hardens people, breaks families, and guarantees repeat harm instead of preventing it. If the goal is safety, the outcomes tell us this approach is failing.
The woman with a fractured skull doesn't care about theory, statistics, or policy explanations. She cares that the man who assaulted her should have been locked up and physically unable to hurt anyone else. Every prior arrest was a clear warning sign, a chance to intervene decisively, and he chose violence again. At some point, patterns matter more than intentions. Your worldview struggles with that reality because once you admit repeated choice, the excuses collapse. So responsibility gets pushed everywhere. Poverty, trauma, systems, except onto the person who actually committed the crime and made the decision to hurt someone.
People want safety, but they also want stability before violence happens. They want jobs that pay, schools that don't fail, and mental health care that exists before someone reaches a breaking point. You only listen when fear justifies punishment, not when communities ask for prevention. The U.S. incarcerates more people than comparable countries and still has more violent crime. Countries that focus on rehabilitation, treatment, and reintegration don't just feel nicer. They see fewer repeat offenses over time. That's not softness or ideology. It's evidence-based policy producing safer outcomes.
Locking up violent repeat offenders protects innocent people. It's not cruelty, it's responsibility. Crime fell in the 90s when consequences were clear and enforcement mattered, and it rose again in cities that relaxed standards and enforcement. San Francisco, Portland, Philadelphia, these became test cases, and the result was open drug markets, theft, disorder, and people leaving neighborhoods they once trusted. When rules disappear, the most vulnerable suffer first. Ideas don't pay the price when they fail. Ordinary families do, every single day.
Crime dropped in the 90s for multiple reasons. Economic growth, reduced lead exposure, demographic shifts, not just incarceration. Mass incarceration ripped families apart, removed parents from homes, and destabilized entire communities for generations. When incarceration becomes normal, crime becomes cyclical instead of exceptional. We spend far more reacting to crime than preventing it early, then wonder why nothing fundamentally changes. You can't police your way out of every social failure without paying a long-term price.
You tore down standards, discipline in schools, respect for law, and personal responsibility, and now act surprised when social trust collapses. Plenty of poor people don't commit crimes. Plenty of people struggling with addiction don't assault strangers. Circumstances matter, but choice still matters too. When standards disappear completely, compassion stops being mercy and starts enabling harm. And the people hurt most are the ones who can't afford to live somewhere else.
Final question. Should religious values shape how we govern?
Yes, because without them, rights don't have a stable foundation. In a purely material worldview, humans are just advanced animals, and value becomes negotiable depending on usefulness and power. Strip away anything higher than human authority, and rights turn into whatever the strongest group decides they are at that moment. You say rights are obvious, but biology alone doesn't say every human life matters equally. Societies that abandon shared moral limits don't become free. They drift, fracture, and constantly redefine truth to suit whoever is in charge.
That same religious foundation justified slavery, silenced women, and crushed dissent for centuries. Moral progress happened when people challenged religious authority, not when they submitted to it. Nearly every expansion of rights faced religious opposition wrapped in certainty and divine order. When you say religion should guide law, you don't mean general morality. You mean your version enforced by the state on everyone else, regardless of belief or consent. History shows where that leads.
Abolition and civil rights were led by deeply religious people appealing to biblical justice and inherent human dignity. You leave that out because it complicates the narrative. Meanwhile, openly secular regimes, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, killed tens of millions by treating people as disposable material in service of ideology. When morality comes only from human authority, power replaces principle. Majority rule can create rights, but it can erase them just as easily when they become inconvenient or politically costly.
Those deaths came from totalitarian control, not simply from the absence of religion. Religion itself has justified genocide, forced marriage, execution for homosexuality, and denial of medical care. Even today, religious fundamentalism restricts education, healthcare, and personal autonomy for millions. Different cultures reached ideas like reciprocity and harm reduction without sharing scripture. Morality doesn't require mythology. It requires empathy, evidence, accountability, and the willingness to stop harm when we see it.
Then explain why secular movements still borrow religious language, dignity, justice, rights, moral worth, while rejecting its source. You assert human value as obvious without explaining why anyone is obligated to respect it beyond social pressure or fear of punishment. At least I'm honest that moral truth comes from something beyond us. Your worldview relies on faith in human goodness, without explaining why it should survive when power shifts, incentives change, or restraint disappears.
I rely on evidence and outcomes, not ancient authority. Women die because theology overrides medical judgment. LGBTQ youth are pushed into conversion therapy justified by scripture. Children are denied treatment in favor of faith healing. These aren't philosophical hypotheticals. They're real harms happening now. You want those beliefs written into law that governs everyone, including people who don't share your faith or your moral conclusions.
And you use law to silence dissent, closing religious adoption agencies, stripping faith-based schools of accreditation, forcing people to violate conscience or lose their livelihoods. You call that tolerance and progress. I call it ideological enforcement through different tools. You don't want coexistence, you want compliance, even if it means crushing anyone who refuses to conform.
Public institutions follow civil rights law, not theology. Religion doesn't give special permission to discriminate. Believe what you want privately, worship freely. But when you operate in public life, the same rules apply to everyone. Losing automatic dominance isn't persecution. It's equality. We are not going back.
That's the debate. 3 rounds, 2 worldviews, no compromise, no middle ground. Now, you decide who's right.